Hi, I'm Angie Fields. I'm the Director of Clinical Services at Gulfport Behavioral Health, and I'm back again to talk about um, stress management. And today I'm going to be delving into our eating because we have learned a lot about the foods that we ingest and the effects that they have. And some of the research it's very interesting because not a lot of it is in meat. A lot of it is vegetables and other kinds of proteins. So there are us that don't eat healthy, that we stress eat, and with our busy schedules, we tend to take the easy route and get fast food, which is considered junk. So when we talk about managing stress and managing our mood, we really need to look at superfoods. And superfoods each have some benefits to us. So when we talk about superfoods, we're talking about green leafy vegetables like spinach, which contains folate, which produces dopamine. Dopamine is a pleasure-inducing brain chemical that helps us calm down. And foods high in tryptophan, which we've heard about, on Thanksgiving Day, having that turkey coma, that's the tryptophan. Tryptophan's included in nuts, seeds, tofu, fish, lentils, oats, beans, turkey, and eggs. So those are all beneficial. So we have a lot of people that are doing keto type diets right now where they've cut out all the carbs, but the science says that complex carbs like oatmeal can help the brain make serotonin. It's just the bad carbs are what are bad for us. The sugar that's involved in a lot of the carbs are bad for our bodies and our mental health. So and also we talk about salmon. It's an omega-3 fatty acid that has anti-inflammatory properties and may help counteract negative effects of stress hormones. So that's a real positive one. Then there's talk about the connection between the gut and the brain, and that what we eat impacts the brain, and then how our gut impacts how we feel. So we had a lot of stuff with probiotics come out. We have the yogurts and stuff like that. So we do know that probiotics can be helpful in helping feel less stressed. Berries have antioxidants that help improve the body's response to stress. And probably everybody's heard about dark chocolate. Dark chocolate contains unique natural substances that create a sense of euphoria. And euphoria is that happy feeling that we naturally get when we're not depressed. So it can reduce our stress hormones, including cortisol, and it has antioxidants in it, which help the blood vessels to relax and lower the blood pressure, improve circulation. Then there's flaxseed, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. They're all great sources of magnesium, as are leafy vegetables, yogurt, nuts, and fish. And they're loading up on minerals may help regulate emotions as well. So we know that a lot of our nuts and seeds are very healthy for us. And then one of the things that's happening, we're starting to pay attention more to vitamin D. So when people have depression, we're starting to do lab work to see what the vitamin D level is. Being outdoor and getting sunlight is what helps our body generate vitamin D. Well, what are we doing less of, in the last, several years or so, we're not outside as much as we used to be. So there is some correlation between low vitamin D levels and depression. So there's a recommendation to drink milk, and that this can help reduce panic attacks and anxiety disorders. So when do we know that stress has gotten to be too much? What are the signs of needing professional help? So I'm going to talk about depression and some anxiety disorders. Depression, we often, we have a lot more exposure to mental health diagnoses than we used to have with the internet. So there are a lot of mental health terms that are being used by, people that aren't really accurate. So we often will say, I feel so depressed today, but actually depression is a condition. And we feel sad or down a lot or all the time, but it's actually a change in our brain chemicals that's resulted in that feeling. So symptoms of depression are, like I mentioned, feeling sad or down all day, feeling tired or fatigued, a loss of energy nearly every day. We may have, a decreased interest in things that we normally would love to do and lost interest in that. We might start declining invitations to go places or to do things that we originally, usually like to do. And then there just is a flat inability to experience pleasure, which is a term called anhedonia. So one of the things that's a hallmark of depression is, disturbing sleep. So we may have trouble falling asleep, and then by the time we do fall asleep, it's almost time to wake up and go to work. Or we may fall asleep okay, wake up and can't go back to sleep. So that's a hallmark of depression. And then when we're depressed, we have a really hard time problem solving and concentrating, weighing the pros and cons of situations. And as I talk about the symptoms of depression, we're progressing to severity. So we may have decreased sleep, we have decreased appetite, we may actually feel hungry, but there's nothing we really care about eating. So the appetite is impacted. Sometimes we're looking for something to eat, we can't find anything we're really wanting to eat, and so we just give up and say, I'm not going to eat. To frequent crying episodes. So crying spells are a big thing with depression. Ordinarily we wouldn't get upset about something that, now we're crying very easily about. We maybe get easily frustrated and can't manage the intensity of a situation that we used to be able to manage very well. And then it progresses into passive suicidal ideation. So passive suicidal ideation, a lot of people, when you ask them if they're suicidal, they will say no, because they don't have any plan to hurt themselves and they're not planning to kill themselves. But they might feel so miserable and want to be dead. So we'll ask questions like, do you have thoughts of wishing that you would go to sleep and not wake up? Do you have, thoughts about wishing that you would get in a car wreck and die? So those can be passive suicidal ideation because you're not actually making a plan to end your life. Active suicidal ideation is when you've weighed the pros and cons of this is, hanging versus overdose, or those kinds of things that you're weighing the pros and cons. Who's going to find me? What kind of mess is it going to cause? When you're in that mode of thought, then you're definitely having active suicidal ideation and you're a danger to yourself. And obviously, if you've had an attempt, if you've had a prior attempt, that increases your risk factors for a repeat. Okay, moving on to anxiety. So anxiety is, all of us, like I mentioned earlier in stress, we have a level of anxiety, and there's a normal amount that we feel about situations. When anxiety is a problem, it's that the worry that we're experiencing is disproportionate about the things that we're worrying about. So normal things we worry about as far as everyday things are money, health, relationships, those kinds of things. Anxiety can have physical effects. So we can have headaches, we can have restlessness where we're fidgety, stomach upset or nausea, irritability and fatigue, or insomnia. One thing about anxiety is when you're able to distract yourself all day and then you go to lay down to go to sleep, and then your mind is kind of cleared and all of the things that maybe you've avoided come to surface, and then you're worrying and perseverating. Rumination is what the term is. And so if anxiety is more severe, you can have what's called a panic disorder, and a lot of people call it panic attacks. And that's when we have panic episodes that last anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes that are very intense. They come on suddenly, and it involves some bodily physiological changes. So our heart rate might, start racing, shortness of breath, dizziness, numbness, or changes in your body temperature. A lot of people who experience panic attacks often wonder if they're having a heart attack and will actually seek medical help. So now we're going to talk about PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder fits underneath anxiety because it involves the reaction. Our body reacts like it's anxious. But post-traumatic stress disorder really has to do with experiencing a trauma. What's the hallmark of PTSD? Flashbacks. So flashbacks are not just a memory. And where PTSD gets really debilitating is if I'm having a flashback and I'm re-experiencing the traumatic situation that I was in. And in that moment, while I'm in a flashback, I'm in what's called a dissociative state. I'm out of touch with reality during that moment. So it's quite debilitating. Most people who have post-traumatic stress disorder are going to try to avoid triggers to a flashback. And it's hard to control all of the triggers because we're out in society. What if it's a song that triggers the flashback, or it's a smell, or the people and the sounds that you're around? So any of those can trigger a flashback, which then you can be out of touch with reality for a while. People who have PTSD have what's called an exaggerated startle response. So it's like they tend to overreact in situations where maybe somebody walks up to them or something like that. It's because they're kind of on guard on a consistent level. So that covers the, how do we know when we need help? That covers the things that are related to stress the most: anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. At Gulfport Behavioral Health, we offer confidential assessments at no charge, and give people recommendations for what level of care will best meet their needs. If you're experiencing some of those things and you're not sure about where to go, we also have an anxiety hotline that we have master's level clinicians available to, kind of talk about what your concerns are and gear you to the right direction as far as seeking help, maybe therapy or medication management. So on the screen right now, I have a list of online support groups and the resources for this presentation, so that if you want to look for information regarding managing stress or about mental illness, they're available to you.